Hey everybody,
Good.
it's Steve and Nicole, Steve Marchand, Nicole Bump, here again because it's the beginning of another week. With I keep thinking maybe there'll be a week it slows down, maybe, but this is not the week.
Maybe June.
Maybe June, and then yesterday over the weekend, thanks to Nicole and a third member of our team, Shayna Potvin, who was unable to join us today, but uh, there are a variety of information available at movethegoalpostnh.com. So feel free to follow along by going to movethegoalpostnh.com, and we'll rifle through some bills, and then also go on our Facebook page, the Move the Goalpost Facebook page. You'll see some of the graphics there, and then some of the links that will accompany, I think, what we'll be talking about for the next few minutes here.
Yeah, so
Nicole,
on the
what are your
website,
thoughts?
just you can click legislative alerts right at the top of the website when you get
Oh,
there.
yes. Thank
Yep,
you.
no problem.
That's right.
Yeah. What are my thoughts this week? Well, I'm kind of angry. There's a lot there's a lot to oppose. I don't know, that's becoming a common theme, I think, the anger on Monday morning trying to go through these things.
I
Um,
did notice more oppose calls to action than support calls to action this week.
Well, so I think there were more opposed on the graphic for sure, because I think those are some of the most important ones happening this week. There are a few more that we could support when you hit the website and we provide some more details. But yeah, those little graphics on Facebook unfortunately can't fit every single issue, so we try to pick the ones that are most impactful for the week on there. One of those being opposing HB 751, which
Oh,
is the open enrollment bill that they have kind of pushed through with some loopholes so that they don't have to take our public comment, which is lovely.
it's
Uh,
pretty remarkable. And I'll have something up on the Substack tomorrow. I'm writing something up on it that puts New Hampshire in the context of the country. There really is no state that is more poorly equipped to handle open enrollment, certainly of the style being proposed, than New Hampshire, mainly because we rely more on local property taxes to pay for schools. And if we, in effect, largely eliminate the line of school districts uh, almost overnight, the way that they're proposing it, you have vast differences in how much each student's cost per pupil is because of all these different districts that overnight would create dramatic complications. And you will be hearing a lot about it this week, but this is the big bill, and it's not a hearing, right, Nicole? You were
yeah,
mentioning that.
Yeah, so there's been some confusion when I put this out, like, oh, I have to keep track of which ones I've already done, or when's the hearing date and what's the committee on this one. Well, some of these things, as the bills progress through the legislative process, the action items change. So this one didn't have a hearing at all, so it's a little bit of a special situation. But other ones have already had their hearings, and now it's email your legislators. So we want to oppose HB 751 by emailing our legislators this week before Thursday. We want to ask them to vote non concur, which means they're not going to concur with the Senate's bill that put this forward. So that's what we want to do on HB 751. We email the reps. There is a link in the post to find your reps' emails if you need that information. Another thing to stress in your email is that this really should have a public hearing. So feel free to throw that in there as well.
That's right. And what we'll have, I think we'll be able to put this up over the next day or two, some additional arguments that can be made based on some of the homework I'm doing today. There really is no state in the country. You could be a supporter. You could even be a supporter of the open enrollment concept and decide that this particular method of doing it is worst case scenario. And I do think that one of the ways that this could be defeated or non concurred would be a critical mass of Republicans who decide that even if they're generally in support of the concept, they find this particular style of it and the method in which they're trying to jam it in a bridge too far, just as they did earlier a few weeks ago with some other education related bills. So if you're in a quote red district, don't think you don't have a say. You may have the most say right now. If you're in a place like Salem or Windham or Hampstead, and some other districts will identify, that may actually be the most powerful voice of all. But all of you have the ability to communicate between now and Thursday to your legislator about this bill.
Well, and one of the things that I just want to mention from a Goffstown perspective, and I think this plays in a lot of other towns as well, is like we have a lower cost per pupil. It's one of the things that we actually tout, like, hey, look what we're getting done for such a low cost per pupil. It's something like 16, and change per pupil. Well, the only way you get to go to say Bedford is if you're willing to pay the difference between Goffstown and Bedford. Correct me if I'm wrong, Steve. I think it's that the family has to pay the difference.
That's right.
So that means this really doesn't help anyone that cannot then pay almost a $4,000 difference between some of the lowest cost per pupil schools and higher cost per pupil schools in New Hampshire. So the parent has to be able to pay that difference, and they have to be able to drive their kids to the school. So it's really just going to be something that only more privileged people, if you will, and wealthier people and people that have time outside of work to transport their children are going to be able to take advantage of.
One other thing, and this will be in the piece tomorrow. So the Reason Foundation, Reason Magazine is a longstanding libertarian magazine, and they have a foundation, the Reason Foundation, that does a lot of research. So they are big supporters of open enrollment, as you might imagine. There are 15 states in the country that they give an above average grade to for their open enrollment policies. All right. Of the 15, 14 of them do not charge tuition difference between school districts. If, as in the example you just gave, if a kid from Goffstown were to go to Bedford, they'd be on the hook for thousands of dollars. That family would be. And but even the Reason Foundation says is it states that do not have the tuition list transfer are a big problem, even within the open enrollment community, because they see it as a real barrier to what they would like, which is to try to create this choice, right? That's what they're looking for. But even they acknowledge that this system, the only state in the country that gets an above average grade on open enrollment and would have a system like this is Christy Nome's South Dakota. That is the only state, and it has its own set of problems beyond that. We really are uniquely in a terrible position to do it. So this is a big deal.
All right, so we want to oppose HB 751 on open enrollment, and that's by emailing your reps, asking them to vote non-concur, and tell them that they really should be having a public hearing to listen to their constituents. Positive one in education, support HB 1212, which establishes a commission to review some draft rules related to minimum standards for public school approval and state academic standards. So this is a good one. And it is one that you can submit House testimony on this week. It just needs that online submission versus an email. And actually, that one's today. So it's happening at 1, but you can submit your testimony online until midnight today, I believe. So go ahead and get that done today. Another big one. Yeah, that was pretty straightforward. So just go online and get that done today, preferably. Another big one that we want to make sure to cover, though, is to oppose HB 155, which is the cut to the business enterprise tax. Really don't need another business tax cut right now while we're all struggling to pay property taxes. This would drain millions. I think it's something like 26 million a year from schools, housing, healthcare, childcare, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of that then gets pushed onto the property taxpayer. So this one, though, it's a House Bill 155, but it's over in the Senate now. So the link is to provide Senate testimony on this bill. So that one's coming up on Thursday.
And if you missed it, just before this, as part of the reason we didn't do this at noon, is the New Hampshire Fiscal Policy Institute just did a webinar this morning that went into the weeds, and nobody gets into the weeds like those guys about the BET, about this tax. And I watched a little of it. It is, first of all, they'll have it up, so you should check that out if you have the time to be more fluent on it. But one of the things they noted, it is shocking how small a number of entities pay the vast majority of this business enterprise tax. Virtually all the little guys out there, the self-employed folks, they pay none or virtually none. What that means is when they cut this tax, this $26 million additional hole that'll get created, the folks getting the benefit of it is generally not the guy down the street who has his own electrician, self-employed, or his self-employed woman who's an accountant. That's not who's paying it. It's a handful of relatively large businesses, often out of state, that do a small amount of a percentage of their business in New Hampshire. They're the ones getting most of the tax cut, which will generate no additional economic activity, not create new jobs. They do a great job today going through it, but this is a very painful cut for very little economic gain for very few entities, most of them not headquartered in New Hampshire.
Yeah, I work for myself. I don't have to pay this because if your business is worth under $300,000 a year, then you don't have to pay it. If you're paying it above that, I did out some math. If your business is worth about $1 million, so we're getting up there a little bit, you're only saving about $1,000 a year. $1 million business saving $1,000 a year, but the the impact on that on our communities is giant. So over the next couple of years, the state is set to lose about $46 million because of this cut. So, and then every year beyond that, continuing to lose the revenue. So, like Steve said, really, really small benefits for the businesses and huge impact on our state revenue.
There you go.
All right. We do have a couple other positive ones we can support in the taxes and cost of living category this week. So we want to support HB 1484, which would establish a minimum wage for New Hampshire. And the minimum wage would start at $12 an hour and then gradually increase over the next few years until it reaches $17 an hour in 2029. Uh, yeah, got anything to say there, Steve?
Yeah, one thing it's an important issue that it flies a little below the radar screen because of some of these other big issues that we talked about the last few weeks. If you get a chance, Kathy Staub is the prime sponsor of this. She is a multi-term, really awesome woman who is a state rep from Manchester. It was a real pleasure to have her on as a guest where we talked about this bill and the minimum wage in general on my podcast a few weeks ago. So if you go to Spotify or Apple podcast, or you can go to the YouTube channel, you can get the full podcast. Kathy really knows this subject cold, and if you're into this topic, I think you'll get a lot out of it that'll help you communicate better about the importance of a higher floor in the wages than we have right now. But this one is also fairly time sensitive, so get your 2 cents in there so people get maybe a little more than 2 cents raised on their minimum wage at some point here. It's a
So
good bill.
I heard some of that interview, Steve, and one of the things I took away from that was Kathy talking about how many people in New Hampshire actually make minimum wage or close to it, and what sort of roles they're in. And it really hit home because you think, oh, who's actually making minimum wage? Maybe it's some teenagers at, the fast food joint or whatever it is. But a lot of like thousands of people doing things like janitorial and sanitation roles and home healthcare workers, and these people are really important to our communities functioning, and they deserve to be paid a living wage for this very important work they're doing. Thousands of people in New Hampshire in these roles. So yeah, if you do have a time to listen to that interview, it was a good one.
She was great. All right.
All right. Another good one. We did talk about this last week. We again want to support HB 1750, which would make an appropriation for New Hampshire's SNAP program. What happened was the federal government decided, hey, we don't want to cost share with you on this anymore. And they took away about $4.4 million. So for our program to keep running, we need to make an appropriation to make sure that about 75,000 people in New Hampshire can continue to get their food benefits. The hearing was rescheduled on this one, so it is today. It actually already happened this morning, but you can get your testimony in by the end of the day today. So another time-sensitive one.
Yep, and this one has a real shot at bipartisan support. And so again, irrespective of who your legislator is, who you talk to on the committee, this is one where I think we have a chance to connect across the aisle.
Very good. So that was today in finance. So you can go on in there and support HB 1750. All right, on to housing. We've got another crappy housing bill to oppose. From my lovely, Rep. Joe Alexander on the Housing Committee there, 1196, it repeals the New Hampshire Housing Championship designation and grant program. So this program provides grants to towns, municipalities that adopt housing-friendly policies and build housing-friendly infrastructure. Things like, adding water and sewer lines so that new developments can go in. So money that would help the towns to do these things, even though towns are struggling with their budgets right now. This bill would repeal that program. So the action item on this one is to email your representatives. It has already had its hearing, and we want them to vote no on the repeal of the bipartisan housing championship program.
Yep, like I said, we talked about that last week, and some of the sponsors of this are in some of the most competitive House districts in New Hampshire in 2026 on what voters are telling us is arguably the number one issue facing New Hampshire. So this is a real bullseye opportunity. Identify your state rep. We have a state rep from Bedford here. We have a state rep from Stratford County up in Barrington area, which is extremely competitive. So this one's important. And it's the number one issue. And one thing I can tell you about politicians, no matter how much they read or don't read, they do read one thing: polls. And the polls say housing matters, and we need to remind them of that.
Yeah, I don't get the repealing the housing stuff right now. I think it's just because, like you said on another call, Steve, they have no revenue coming in, so they're just cutting basically everything. Um,
You got it.
yeah, cutting things on the most important issues in the state right now. We do have a couple of good things to support in housing, though, this week. We talked about this one already, too, but now we're emailing reps for supporting HB 1612, which would prohibit landlords from using price fixing software. So, really, a way to protect renters from price fixing. Um, Careful on the verbiage of this one. It is on the website, on the thing that we're tracking here, legislative alerts. But we want to urge them to vote no because the recommendation from the committee is inexpedient to legislate. So that means the committee is saying, nope, don't want to pass this. If they vote yes, they're agreeing with that recommendation. So just be careful with the verbiage. We've put it all in the document for you so that you know what to say. Thank
That's very important. Thank you for clarifying that. But yeah, that we talked about that one, and it's this one you can also talk about in the context. I mean, this is about working people. It's about giving people a shot to get onto the ladder of housing. So that's an urgent one.
Yep, and another good one from housing is 1661, which expands the Community Heroes Initiative. We did talk about this a little bit already in a previous week, but it provides financial assistance to essential workers that are trying to buy their first home. So I know it includes police and fire. I think it includes some medical workers. I forget all the categories, but basically anybody that was categorized as an essential worker and is trying to buy their first home would be able to get a small amount of assistance for their costs of that process. And the recommendation on this bill was to kill it. So we want to email our representatives and urge them to vote no to keep helping these essential workers afford housing.
I mean, it's everybody you mentioned, also daycare,
Oh, yep.
elder care workers,
Yep.
healthcare, active members of the armed services. I mean, one of the things I could tell you from back in the day when I was in office as a mayor, especially with educators, firefighters, police starting out, they're not becoming millionaires doing this. There's a public service element to this that is just so laudable. And you have to find ways in the absence of being able to compensate them directly to help try to bring down the cost of living in the community. What we don't want generally as local office holders are to have our local educators and public safety officials having to drive half an hour to get to work every day.
Or
Because
more.
one thing we know is when the opportunity to live closer to where they work comes up, that's how we often lose some of our great younger municipal workers. So this is a way, it's not just to help people who are helping us. It's also a way to retain talent, often at the younger end of the scale, what we want are folks that make their career in the community. That's how you get your best workforce. So there's a
Yep.
lot of strategic benefit to this one, I think.
Which ends up not only being a positive for the community, but saving the community as money as well. It's a lot of money
Totally.
to recruit and retain talent.
Totally.
All right, so on to healthcare. Super fun one we want to oppose today in HB 1811, which would repeal statutory immunization requirements for children. I don't know about you, but I'm not up for increasing the likelihood of dangerous disease outbreaks, so I am greatly opposed to this one. We're seeing big like measles outbreaks in a lot of places around the country right now. North Carolina, for example, I think there's some out west. Kids are getting really sick, and people that have been vaccinated even are having breakthrough cases because of these situations. So this would be dangerous to public health, in my opinion. This one is still a submit your testimony online stage, so you can submit house testimony by Thursday.
That's all there is to say about that.
Yep.
Please do this. You got till the 4th, so that would be Wednesday, right? Wednesday at 9 a.m.
Oh, yeah, maybe it's Wednesday.
Is
I
it
said
Wednesday? Yeah.
yeah, I said
Okay,
Thursday.
that's all right.
I don't know.
Do it today.
Don't
Just do
know.
it today.
It's Monday. All right. Next one is we want to support HB 1316, which would be restricting the collection and disclosure of autism related data by state agencies. I don't know why the state needs to be able to disclose anybody's autism data, but that sounds like a pretty bad idea to me. I know there are a lot of people online that are pushing against this. There should not be any sort of disease registry for any disease. So we want to support HB 1316, and that's also coming up on Wednesday.
All right. Now, these are big days coming up this week. Yeah, seems like a no-brainer, but there's a lot of things I thought were no-brainers.
Well, I mean, we had the opportunity a few years ago to, in Goffstown, buy into the state's vaccine registry, which would allow parents to give their doctor's authorization to give vaccine records directly to this registry, and the schools could use the registry. So basically, what that would mean is parents don't have to like collect all this information from the doctor and then provide it to the school every year. It was totally opt in, and people were up in arms about this. Like, why would I want a registry of my vaccine? Even though it was like private for you to opt into and it was not mandatory. But now we're saying we want all this data collected on autism. So
This
a
topic
little
has switched.
hypocritical.
There's so much on this that has switched in the last few years. Obviously, the prominence, the rise of RFK in the MAGA coalition has had some effect on all this too. This is one of those issues I never thought a decade ago we would be at the place that we are in these conversations. And so this is a proactive way to say, hey, there's something to privacy still here. So,
Yep.
but it's getting worked in a variety of ways. So that is also for Wednesday at 2 o'clock, HB 1316. Again, for those that have hopped in later, you can follow along as we're coming down the stretch here at movethegoalpostnh.com. And then go to the top. You'll see at the top of the homepage legislative alerts, and you'll see this week's stuff and one way to follow along or to come back afterwards.
Yeah, I actually like to just have this open on one side of my screen and then have the submission forms or the, email open on the other side of my screen and kind of back and forth as I go. It's nice to have it all in one spot. And while we're mentioning tips, you do not have to send a separate email for each of these issues to your reps. You can put them all into one email. That is what I did. Hey, I've got a few things for you today, and boom, 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 all in one email is perfectly acceptable, probably preferable. All right. We categorize the rest of these as other issues because it's not one of the primary things we typically follow, but we want to support HB 1487, which would create an independent commission to propose redistricting maps for our legislature, which would fix the problem we have in New Hampshire of partisan gerrymandering. Uh, this already went through the committee, so it's another email your representatives piece, and we want them to vote no on the inexpedient to legislate again. So we want them to support HB 1487 and vote no. Any thoughts there, Steve?
I mean, look, unfortunately, we've gotten to a place where we're in an arms race between the two parties around the country, where I'm not trying to point fingers, but you got to call it out. Republicans around the country, President Trump pushing them, trying to max out the number of congressional seats they can get, has all kinds of downstream effects. Democrats have felt you can't unilaterally disarm, and this doesn't end well.
No.
And in New Hampshire, we don't want to go down that road. And in fact, the best practices would be something like this. So we don't want this to die an uh, ignominious death legislatively this week. So let's tell folks we want an independent commission.
Yeah, and what I like to say too is this protects all of us and increases confidence in our elections for everybody because 2030 comes around, Democrats might actually be in power in New Hampshire. That's that's what we're working for here. So we could then gerrymander it. We could gerrymander it to our advantage. So having an independent commission really protects everybody. Having independent maps. So yeah, Republicans are against it right now because they've got their districts nice and gerrymandered, but it could go the other way at any point.
That's right. That's right.
All right. The last two have here are some firearms related bills. We want to oppose 1697, which would exempt firearms manufactured and retained in New Hampshire from federal regulation. So basically, if you manufacture a gun in New Hampshire and you plan to just keep it in New Hampshire, then you don't have to follow federal rules for that gun. And as you might imagine, we don't have a whole lot of federal regulation on our gun safety as it is. So this really kind of weakens that limited gun safety, gun violence prevention, actions that we have, and weakens tracking and accountability. So unfortunately, this one has already gone through public hearing. So again, it's an email. We want them to vote no on the ought to pass recommendation. The committee did vote that it ought to pass. Fun times. And I'll just go right into the next one because it's
Sure.
also
Yeah.
firearms. So we want to oppose HB 1793 as well, which prohibits public colleges and universities from regulating possession or carrying firearms on campus. So an individual school would not be able to say, we don't want firearms on campus. This also got an ought to pass recommendation from the committee. So we want to email our reps and ask them to vote no.
Pretty straightforward. This one has actually gotten a lot of attention. A couple of the sponsors, or the primary sponsor of it, is a young Republican state rep from Rochester, Sam Farrington, who has made this one of his signature issues in his first term as a legislator. And if you look at it, the by and large, the list of sponsors and co-sponsors is kind of a who's who of on not just Second Amendment, but on a variety of issues, folks that are typically on some of the wilder stuff that we're talking about this year. So this is definitely one that I would argue is as much about the show and being able to highlight an issue and beat that drum as it is about the policy itself. And so this is an important one. It may be last on our list today, but it is not because it's last on the list of importance or anything. Take a few moments and vote no on the ought to pass recommendation on 1793.
We've got a comment here from Walter.
Yes.
He's provided a sample app.
Oh,
I'm not really sure what you're saying here, Walter, but he provide testifynh.com, suggesting that people take a look at it. Does anybody else on the call have anything they want to bring up as something to pay attention to this week?
yeah. Here we go. I've just gone on the site. That's very nice. I mean, I think there's so many of us that are in our own in different ways trying to get key bills, pro and con, in front of people around the state. And this is very nice. I'm going to definitely take a look at this. TestifyNH.com. That a lot of overlap on the bills here. So the most important thing is to get the word out. There was somebody near the top, Curtis Hamilton. I just want to note, and I appreciate Curtis. See an open letter currently circulating around New Hampshire school board members, like you have been in the past, Nicole, and district leaders with over 300 signatures and over 40 superintendents raising concerns about the open enrollment. And I see here there is a link to a doc, and I presume that relevant folks probably could add their name to it if they are current or past members of the relevant groups.
Yippee. That was not my most fun role.
That is
Uh,
not. That is God's work.
Linz is saying that there are also bills right now that are harmful to LGBTQ plus people, especially young people who deserve safety and dignity. So one we want to pay attention to is Senate Bill 430, which would expand the forced outing of students by requiring schools to disclose private details about them to parents. So yep, that is another one that we want to pay attention to.
Huh.
I'm not sure. So we're SB 430. I can take a quick look and see where we are in the process there.
Wow. Like, yeah, looking at this, and one of the things, and I mentioned it this morning in the Substack message we sent out. There, we definitely appreciate getting the feedback in real time here. There are so many bills, and sometimes I think there's a little bit of the Trumpian throw enough stuff against the wall, and then important things end up getting through, in part because we can't all catch everything.
Right.
And so this is one of the ways we try to find some of the holes, and make sure that we're hitting everything that really matters. So thank you, Linz, for this.
So this one is still in committee. It appears to have a hearing tomorrow. So you can go on the Senate testimony site, which we do have a link on that blog post with all the stuff. You can go to the submit Senate testimony. And this one is SB 430. And it looks like you're going to want to oppose this one. Yep, oppose the mandatory disclosure of school district employees to parents. You gotta love how they word some of these things too, right? Obviously the schools are not trying to keep things from parents. Sometimes the kids are just like, not in a safe place. Anyway, I'm not gonna. But Goffstown has a page that you actually all could follow if you're interested in LGBTQ plus issues. I think it's Goffstown. Here, let me look it up. But they share a bunch of these legislative alerts. Let me see. Goffstown area LGBTQ. So if you follow that page, they provide a lot of related legislative alerts, and I think they had that one on there today. Yeah, they do. So if you're interested in supporting and or opposing bills for LGBTQ issues, that's a great page to follow.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm looking at the language of one of the bills that was mentioned here, HB 1792, and some of it is just even the framing of it is an attempt to change the conversation in I think a negative way, referring the bill title to prohibiting school districts and personnel from the instruction of, among other things, LGBTQ plus ideology, which is that, I mean, that's a framing right there,
Right,
as if being gay is an ideology.
right. And what does that include having an LGBTQ person in a book? Is that ideology? Like, is that banned from that? So, yeah. Anyway, language 100% matters, and people are tricky with the language on these bills, specifically to give people feelings one way or another. Yeah, it can be insidious.
Well, thank you again for all that feedback. That is what we have on the list, and it is a little past one. And I'm as guilty. I'm more guilty of this than anybody. Trying to tighten some of these up a little. I am not the person for you to try to tighten stuff up.
Oh, Lynn had one more comment that's just
Oh,
good. She
sure.
said 603 Equality Action page is also a good resource. So it's 603equality.org if you're interested in following those issues.
Okay. Oh, that's excellent. We will get this video out later today as well. And then again, go to movethegoalpostnh.com. You can get the details on all this, including links about the bills, links to communicate in the best way possible with the various legislators. And again, we're always looking for feedback. You can send an email through the website if you have additional feedback, errors, additions, you name it. Uh, Positive
Yeah,
reinforcement.
we're frantically putting these things together over the weekend. So sometimes, there's typos or, links to other bills that are not the correct ones. So just drop us a line and let us know.
Please let us know, and please share. Go to Move the Goalposts Facebook page and share. And you'll see in these legislative alerts, not just the graphic itself, but in the body of it, some outstanding uh, work links to the appropriate places, as well as ways to be able to download the specific graphics with the appropriate language. That we do a lot of work, and we've done a different programming, a lot of work on understanding the different kinds of voters, because we're not just trying to talk to the folks, the 30% of Americans who are hardcore, high engagement Democrats. Those folks are already largely on the same side of these issues. How do we get the folks that aren't part of that 30%? They don't see the world exactly the same way. They don't use the same language. They don't necessarily prioritize issues the same way, and that's okay. We have to understand that and transmit our values through the prism of life as they see it. And that is a big part of how we build durable majorities and get things done and conquered. So that's a lot of the work behind the scenes that goes into what you see here.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, we got
Pete,
it done nice and fast today, Steve.
that was better. We're getting there. Thanks again, everybody. And please check out the website, check out the Facebook page, check out the Substack at stevemarchand.com. We'll have something about the open enrollment bill tomorrow, and I hope you'll read that and then, act accordingly. Nicole, thank you so much. Always good to see you.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, guys, have a great rest of your day.
Bye.
See you soon. Bye bye.